and the judges may now introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, New York Wild. My name is Maria Garnett. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I specialize in state government policy, so I'm currently policy advisor for the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services. Prior to that, I was a nonpartisan policy analyst, and I evaluated the performance of government programs for the Virginia General Assembly. This is my third year of involvement with We the People, and I'm very excited to be with you today.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Petra Al-Sufi. I am the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. We are a research and education organization that research American Muslims and other faith communities. I'm also on the board of the Michigan Center for Civic Education. And many years ago, I was a student participant in We the People program. So this is me telling you, take a deep breath. It's not the end of the world today. It's going to be a good experience. And many years from now, you'll look back and say, you know what, that was good. So welcome.
So it's still morning where I'm at, but I'll say good afternoon. My name is Dan Wong. I'm a retired attorney and former judge. I'm on the National Board of Directors of the Center for Civic Education. I live in Boise, Idaho, which is in Mountain Daylight Saving Time. So it's only 10 a.m. here, but that means I got up at 5 a.m. this morning to participate. I'm excited to listen to your testimony and presentation today. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So students, if you could please introduce yourselves and tell us your school name and introduce your teacher as well, that'd be awesome.
Hi, my name is Richard Barney.
Hi, my name is Owen Bates.
Hi, my name is Caleb Johnson. We're from Westfield School, and our teacher is Mr. Berner.
Good afternoon and good morning to one of you. Thank you so much for volunteering your time. I look forward to listening to the conversation as I check out here.
Fantastic. So I am now going to read your Unit 6 question that you will be answering today. President Dwight Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What disagreements did the founders have about a standing army, and are they relevant today? And to what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence?" You may begin.
Thank you. The presence of the American military throughout history has been heavily disputed, from the time of our fight for independence against Britain to the Capitol riot earlier this year. The importance and necessity of a standing military has varied. Our founding fathers argued over whether to establish a strong military presence domestically and internationally, with James Madison being one of the most vocal proponents for a strong central government, speaking against it.
At the Constitutional Convention, Madison spoke about how the means of defense against foreign dangers have always been the instrument of tyranny at home. Although the founding fathers were right in fearing oppression from a government having the power created by a strong standing military, we believe that a standing army is essential to our country, especially now when the United States has become a global policing power.
Agreeing or disagreeing with the issue of the displacement of power with a standing military is potentially a misleading response. Based on how situational the necessity of a strong military is, in a speech given by George Washington, he spoke of a well-organized militia upon a plan that will pervade all states and introduce similarity in their establishment, maneuvers, exercise, and arms.
In Washington's eyes, the necessity for a large standing army was extraneous because of the independence gained after the Revolutionary War. But he also argued that it may become a question worthy of consideration, whether the surplus should not be applied in preparations for building and equipping a navy, without which, in case of war, we could never protect our commerce, nor yield that assistance to each other, which on such an extent of sea coast our mutual safety would require. Thus, the necessity of a standing army may vary based on a perceived and/or imminent threat.
Around the time of Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address, the United States was starting to transition from a conquering imperialistic country into a policing country. With the establishment of NATO, the world became more of a global neighborhood, with the United States as a central part in policing other nations. Although there was this major transition, Eisenhower still feared our imperialistic predispositions, and the military-industrial complex having the power to unreasonably conquer over a weaker nation, which ultimately would cause problems for the United States. But contrary to Eisenhower's fears, within the last 30 to 40 years, the United States has shown a major shift towards policing other nations.
This can be seen in recent events concerning Iraq. Even though the United States entered Iraq and the surrounding areas with the intention to police the conflict and help control the war on terror, and at the same time protecting a source of crude oil, the result was the furthering of that conflict and the removal of our military presence. Even though this advent may not have been successful as we had hoped, it shows the new potential use of our standing military.
Considering the fact that the United States has a military presence in over 70% of the world, impacting nearly a fourth of our national budget, there comes a political divide on how necessary it is for us to police other nations.
Near the end of the Trump presidency, our troops were taken out of Iraq and most of the surrounding areas. But with the beginning of the Biden presidency, it seems our military power has been refocused into promoting a strong foreign presence. Our nation's opinion on the necessity of having a strong military has changed throughout the course of history and will most likely be a forever evolving and debated issue.
Thank you. So you in your testimony, you shared a lot of information about the U.S. military overseas and what that looks like. I am interested in what are the impacts, in your opinion, here domestically of having such a large military presence overseas? And is there anything that you would change in order to ensure that that balance between domestic and foreign impacts is appropriate?
Well, for example, if we look at the issues with 9/11 and the attacks on the World Trade Centers, as a country, before looking back in history as the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we never really thought that another country could attack us on such a level, and the United States was basically at a standstill. So, with the creation of the Patriot Act and the United States banding together to basically end this foreign terrorist group that attacked us in such a great way, it made us realize that we need to stand up for ourselves and protect our nation, and we need to create a military presence over in certain areas so that we can eliminate these terrorist groups, so that something like 9/11 doesn't happen again.
There also comes a divide in our nation of how much money we actually should spend in the military. A lot of our countries, or the countries that we go into, we spend around $1 billion to $1 trillion over as the years go by, and a lot of people debate about how much that will actually help us, and it comes down really to a term called economic interdependence. And the reason why we're in these foreign nations is because we have a global economy, and economic interdependence basically says that if a nation is doing really well and it's very peaceful, then that will affect us because our economy will do better.
And for example, if we
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay. And for example, if we look at the issues going on with Syria and their civil war, there comes a political question of whether we should interact with these foreign affairs. In Syria, there are human rights violations that as a country concerned with the rights of the people and the well-being of the people, that is a concern that we can go into. But if we had that same concern and that same belief, we would also be helping the Myanmar civil war. The reason that we are fighting to help Syria is because they have such oil resources and other resources to that nature. So again, going back to what Owen said with our economic interdependence, it will really help our nation in the long run if we defend areas such as Syria.
So I'm gonna have a follow-up question to some of the statements that I heard. I think it was brought up that 9/11 attack, the Iraq War, and the Patriot Act, and as examples of how this works. And my follow-up question is, wasn't it the military-industrial complex that pushed us into the Iraq War? Assuming that we will stabilize the region and win against terrorism. And now we found out there is clearly no connection between Iraq and what happened in 9/11. That was a terrorist organization, not a country. And the passage of the Patriot Act actually harms the civil liberties and the civil rights of all Americans. So, it's a long way of saying, the examples that you cited, aren't they in reality examples of what Eisenhower kind of warned us against, where the military industrial complex will push us to do whatever we need or whatever they need for their benefit, our own detriment, and not to mention destabilizing a whole region, the Middle East.
So what Eisenhower said is, so if you look at it, when you say complex, it can also be mentioned as a faction. And when Eisenhower says we need to fear the military industrial complex, he's not saying we need to fear the military or the power that we have, but the faction itself. And he didn't want what we call, or he didn't want the military to rule our nation and have like an authoritarianism, but it was more that he wanted us to take a breath from the power of our military and say that we have this faction here that we don't want them to take over. And I think the biggest thing that we have right now is that the president, the commander in chief, is the a civilian authority, and it's not like he is a general or any military officer that controls the world or that controls the nation.
And speaking of civilian authority, this comes into the issue with the Korean War and President Truman firing MacArthur, because MacArthur wanted to basically send more conflict and more military into that area, but without the authorization from President Truman. So Truman basically fired MacArthur because Truman has that, like Owen said, civil authority to put the military wherever he wants because he is the chief of the military. So really, it comes into question of whether we decide if it is important for us economically or politically, whether we should invade these areas and whether we should use it for our benefit. Because, for example, like Afghanistan, we were there for around 20 years and we had boots on the ground for around 20 years. But what did we really gain from that? It was almost like Afghanistan was being used as a political chip in some game of some long-running game that we as civilians aren't really aware of.
So, go ahead.
Everything that our government really does is to benefit and keep the people safe. We're not just going to go to war because we want to go to war. We are going to go to war if it's going to be either beneficial or it's to keep our people safe from harm and try and keep things from getting to the extent that we can't handle or we can't control it and cause more fear and chaos than that is needed, because fear is something that can cause a lot of issues and a lot of fear is basically a war. It's we have a war on fear itself, and that is where terrorism can spry from. It can cause people to do things that you would never think they would do.
And if we want to band together and try and end the issue of these countries or these groups that are attacking our nation, we need to have another event like the Nuremberg trials, so that we can bring these commanders into trial and basically throw the entire book at them, so that the world knows what they did and the world knows how.
All right, that is time.
Right.
Do I finish, or is that
No,
it?
that's
No, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're being very strict on time this
Okay.
with
competition.
nationals. Yeah. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts on this question. And I really liked that, you pulled in other types of examples from world history in particular, like that reference to the Nuremberg trials right there. I think you're the first group today to talk about the Korean War and that sort of power struggle. So in that sense, that was really, really great. I loved hearing your thoughts on all of that. So my biggest point of feedback is pretty significant, and that is that the participation in the question and answer round was really not very balanced across the three of you. I would have loved to hear more equally from each of you. And as you know, that's part of the scoring for We the People, but that's also a good thing to keep in mind later on in college and also in the workforce. So if you notice that you haven't spoken up yet, it's your responsibility to make sure that you do so. And on the other hand, if you notice that you have already had a lot to say, it's your responsibility to make sure to step back a little bit to give room for your colleagues to shine as well. And, I will say this is something that I still struggle with to this day as a grown lady of redacted age in the workforce. So just know that this is a common struggle that all of us face, and I am confident in your ability to rise to it in the future. Great job.
Thank you.
So yes, so to add to what Maria's mentioned, I liked your opening statement. I think you're the first group to take such position on this question. So that's good. We're looking for that. I like the evidence that you cited, the positions that you took, and defended, which is important. It's not just good to say your opinion and not defend it. Couple points of feedback. So to add to what Maria mentioned about the participation, we were only able to get 2 follow-up questions. And so our third judge was not able to ask. So practice getting your answers to be concise and into the point, which is irony coming from me because I'm talking here forever. The other point is I didn't feel the questions were answered fully. So I know the question that I asked, you answered a different part of it, but I didn't see the answer to my question. So that's another point to keep in mind. Great job. Again, you'll survive it. I survived it. It was good. It was good to see your participation.
I did enjoy your presentation. I will tell you that I am impressed, as I can see from your screens, that each of you have had to prepare and are going to present on 2 questions, and that is a lot of work. I've had experience coaching and mentoring teams that had that requirement, and it's a two-edged sword, because I know that on one hand, it actually gives you a wider breadth of knowledge, and you're able to answer questions across the board using more knowledge than you would if you had been focusing on one unit. On the other hand, sometimes a team's ability to have 2 or 3 members focus on one unit makes them, much more prepared and much more detailed and focused. But I am impressed that each of you have done the hard work to prepare and are going to present on 2 units. I did enjoy your presentation. You did have a lot of historical background and references. I agree. I would have liked a little more substance with regard to what we should do, or what the government should do today with regard to the presence, our military presence overseas. I mean, it's a complex issue, and there's a lot to talk about. I would recommend suggesting that on the cross-examination questions that you do answer the question directly and focused, and let us move on to ask additional questions. We do expect good 4-minute presentations at this level. It's the cross-examination where the teams shine, and they shine better if we're able to ask more questions and learn more about your knowledge. It's not required that all three of you answer each of the cross-examination questions. And I'm disappointed, of course, that I didn't get to ask a question, but overall, I think you did a good job and you should be proud of what you've done and all the hard work that you put in. Thank you.
Thank you.